business or nonprofit? Now these two may seem very different, and it might seem like it's a very clear-cut answer to which one should I start, a business or a nonprofit. But in not all cases is it so clear-cut. In this video, I'm going to go over 5 key things to consider when you're making this decision of whether or not to start a business or a nonprofit, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have a better idea of which one is right for you. First off is your purpose and mission. So your purpose is why you're doing this, and your mission is how you're going about it. For a business, there are plenty of people that will tell you that the main goal of a business is to make profit, and I kind of disagree with this, but we'll go into that in a different video. But really the main goal of a business, as I see it, is to solve a problem. And the profit comes when they do solve that problem, when they bring value to the market, and kind of as a way to keep being able to solve that problem by making profit and being able to grow. So when it comes to the purpose and the mission of a business, it is to solve some kind of problem through a product or service, and involving the need to make a profit in order to be able to continue their operations, support their investors, and grow as a company. The purpose and mission of a nonprofit is to contribute to some sort of cause that benefits society. They are established not to make money, not to enrich their investors or their founders or whomever is involved, their board members. They really are there to enrich the community or some segment of it by creating some sort of change in the community and contributing to that greater cause. When you start a nonprofit, you have to understand that this is not about you. This is not about the people in the nonprofit. It's not about the board members. It is about the cause. Next is the source of funding. When you start a business, funding may come from investors, it may come from loans, and ultimately it comes from the activities of the business by creating and selling a product or a service which generates a profit, which then goes back into building the business. A nonprofit, on the other hand, typically relies on things like fundraising, donations, grants, and sponsorships. Nonprofits can also do things like sell products and services in order to generate money that goes to the cause, but that's not seen as profit because it's not going to the investors or the board members or leaving the organization in that sense. It is still going to support the overall cause or the mission that the nonprofit is fulfilling. The third category is understanding investors, stake, and wealth. Now, a business can have owners, investors, shareholders, all of whom own part of the company or stand to gain financially from the success of the business. This is, of course, important to understand for their motivations and their priorities, and to think of things in terms of the business is generating this profit, which ultimately ends up building the wealth of everyone who has a stake in it. For a nonprofit, it's never the goal of a nonprofit to make people wealthy. While it's totally acceptable and understandable to pay workers and staff and leadership a fair salary in a nonprofit, it's a different thing entirely to think about people in a nonprofit owning a certain portion of the nonprofit and receiving a certain amount of financial gain or value from the success of the nonprofit. So this is a very important distinction, that a business can be partially owned by a bunch of different people or entirely owned by someone, versus a nonprofit is owned by no one. They can still have sponsors, donors, grants, things like that, but it's not the same as someone having a stake in it. Number 4 for our key things to think about is this idea of transparency and scrutiny. Now, maybe somewhat counterintuitive, but I think businesses get off easier on this one. While businesses may be criticized for corporate greed in sort of a general sense, it can be a lot easier to sort of stay out of the public eye, especially for a small business, and especially if you're the only one in your business. Businesses will be analyzed for things like their profitability and their margins and their all that kind of stuff. And transparency here is more of an option than a requirement. Businesses seem to have a greater ability to be able to avoid disclosing a lot of details when it comes to their operations or their finances. Of course, publicly traded companies will have to adhere to some level of transparency and scrutiny when it comes to making their investors aware of their operations and things like that. But overall, a business is not going to be typically scrutinized or required to be as transparent as a nonprofit. Now, for nonprofits, they are very often scrutinized for things like how they allocate their funding, especially when it comes to fundraising activities, to paying salaries, and things like that. Of course, this is also understandable because we want to make sure as the public that these nonprofits are taking our hard-earned dollars that we're donating to them and putting them towards the cause that we're trying to support and that they're set up to support. On the other hand, in a lot of ways, it holds the nonprofit back from being able to actually do things like fundraise and keep themselves financially sustainable without having to rely so much on donations, because it is more scrutinized when nonprofits try to put some money towards making more money to be able to keep funding their operations. And not all nonprofits are totally run by volunteers. There are plenty of nonprofits that do pay salaries for their workers, for their leaders, whoever's involved, but that can also be scrutinized and sort of picked apart and criticized with this thought that a nonprofit is totally a charity and that everyone needs to be doing it for free. And at the same time, a business might pay their top tier employees a lot more than a nonprofit pays any of their employees, but because they're not required to be so transparent and because they exist for profit, so it's seen as kind of more okay than this volunteer charity kind of idea of a nonprofit, then that doesn't get scrutinized nearly as much as how these nonprofits allocate their funds. While it may seem a tricky thing for us as the public to think that our donated dollars are going to paying the staff of a nonprofit, and maybe we would prefer those funds going to something else that the nonprofit does, it's also very difficult to think of a nonprofit surviving solely on volunteer efforts and being able to retain that top talent that's really going to help the nonprofit grow and support the cause when they're not able to pay them a fair salary and enable them to make a living and support themselves so that they can give back to the cause as well. And number 5 is measuring success. When it comes to a business, measuring success often comes down to looking at a few key data points, things like the stock price, the profitability, the cash flow, things like that. And most of these are financial numbers. Now, of course, a business may contribute to helping the environment in some way. They may contribute to making people's lives better. But ultimately, when their success is measured, it comes down to the numbers. Any impact data about what kind of change they're making or what kind of contributions to the world that they're making usually just end up in marketing to be able to kind of win people over, which is fine. But measuring success in business largely comes down to the financials. And nonprofits. Let's face it, when we're starting or growing a nonprofit, working in the cause, helping out in whatever way we can, we're kind of fighting an unwinnable war. These are big picture causes and issues that we're working with that are probably not going to go away overnight. And because of this, it can be very difficult to actually be able to measure success or to be able to track the impact that a nonprofit makes. And of course requires keeping a lot of data, but that data can also be sort of subjective or qualitative and not easy to pin a certain number on. And of course the financial numbers in the business world don't translate the same way into the nonprofit sector. We can't just measure the profitability of a charity organization. Looking at something like funds generated versus how they are spent does not give us the same idea that like business profitability would give us. And again, it comes back to that idea of measuring impact and how difficult that can be in something like a nonprofit. Who determines if a certain amount of impact achieved is worth a given amount of funding? A lot of these causes are things that we typically feel very uncomfortable putting a price on, and that can make it difficult to answer a question like that and be able to be comfortable with how much are we willing to spend on a certain amount of impact and how do we measure if we're staying on track with our goals. Now, with all that said, there is a little bit of middle ground when it comes to businesses and nonprofits. There are things like B corporations, nonprofits that own businesses, and all sorts of things that we'll discuss in more videos to come. But for now, think about these 5 things, do your research, and really try to think about the differences within these 5 key factors. Because while there can be some overlap between businesses and nonprofits, ultimately the differences are going to help you decide which path is right for you. Here at the Ramen Phase, our goal is to help new businesses, nonprofits, and people just looking for financial independence survive this early phase of entrepreneurship and of starting up that next new adventure. So if you're interested in more content like this, you're always welcome here, and I hope to see you in the next one.